recognizing the House Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think it's just important to acknowledge that the reason why School District 63 has seen such a large expansion in the number of schools that have been approved is not because of any one brand of government or another. It's because there's been a massive population growth with a large number of families out there that if the provincial government wasn't building, whichever brand of provincial government was in power at the time wasn't building schools, that'd be a big, big problem for the communities on the West Shore. So when the board chair suggests that it's the BC-NDP that are responsible for the expansion, it was the BC-NDP that was in government at the time when that happened. It just needs to be, I think it just needs to be said. We're now coming up to budget time, and I just been invited to deal with the budgets or to see the budget presentations from each of the two school districts in my riding. And one of the things that I've been hearing about from both 63 and 64, and I think it's the same, the member from Surrey mentioned the unfunded inflationary pressures. The provincial government year over year, since we've come into, since 2017, has talked about increasing the funding for the education system. Unfortunately, the unfunded inflationary pressures continue to be a problem for school districts, specifically school districts that have stable enrollment, like School District 63 as an example. Because the funding has largely been around the per student. The increase of population has brought more funding into the schools. The schools have not been seeing an increased funding per student, and they have continued to have a challenge. We are going to see school districts in the next few weeks be publicly talking about the cuts that they're going to have to make to our children's children's education system. Arts are going to be on the chopping block. We're going to be hearing about school districts that are going to have to make a decision about which of the designated students gets support staff with them. We're going to continue to hear about administrators who are making the terrible decision that this student gets support and that student doesn't, yet both of them have the designation. Why isn't it that this government increased the funding for schools to deal with the inflationary pressures that they're facing today, this year, and specifically this year, with the inflation rate as it is right now?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, Madam Chair, to the member opposite. I just want to want them to know that the government is providing operating grants to school districts for the 2022-23 school year that total an estimated $5.876 billion. In addition, more than $679 million is provided in special purposes grants such as classroom enhancement funding and community link. And we also know, the ministry is aware that 89% of the school budgets are wages, and we are funding, we know that we just had a collective agreement negotiation just a few months ago. So this budget is also providing funding for that. Along with that, you mentioned a really good point, Madam Chair, the member made a very important point about the inflation. And we know that how global inflation is impacting everybody, and the families and the students who go to schools. And we know that how important it is for the students to, how food is so important in students' learning. And that's why this year's budget also includes an investment of $212 million, Madam Chair, that will be going to the school food program. And it is I'm really, really happy to say that it is a 3-year program. It is like we want to provide some kind of consistency to that program. So it is going to be a 3-year program that would be providing school meals to all the school districts across the province.
Member.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to the minister. And you know, I was too eager to point out the nuance. I should have started, Minister, by congratulating on your appointment. I know we've spent quite a bit of time in this room, actually, in committee together. And so when I saw your appointment, I was very happy. Now I have to go back to asking questions. So
And through the chair.
all right, pause. I think one of the challenges with the response, frankly, is that we recognize that education is one of the larger budgets within the provincial budget, one of the larger line items. And it should be. It's a cornerstone of a modern society, is how we educate our children. And so I don't think anybody in this province will look at the number and say that's too much. In fact, I think mostly people look at it and see that the investments that are going in are for the increased wages. They previously to that new collective bargaining agreement, they were to make up for the returned language that the courts required. What we're not seeing is an increase. We're not seeing the increases because education is that priority that it should be. We're seeing because we've got a new collective bargaining agreement for teachers, so that looks like there's a much larger increase than actually is going in. It's going to the same people that are already there, right? The returned language is going to the same people that are already there. It's not going to increase the technology accessibility for our students, upgrading computers, making sure that our students have good quality technology in their schools, making sure that they've got good quality materials to learn from, updated materials, so that they're not learning from the outdated materials that I learned from, because it didn't do me any good, and it's so I think that the challenge that we're facing here in the coming weeks is pressure on school boards, and it will be parents looking at school boards who are trying to get the same out of funds that are not increasing. It looks like the budget went up because we're giving more money to the same people that are already there, but it hasn't improved the position of education overall to the level that I think that British Columbians expect for our public education system. When it comes to the response with respect to food, that absolutely, my daughter, the school that she goes to has a food program, and that has lifted a lot of kids into a better place for learning. But it does not address the fuel for the buses, the cost of heating, the ability for schools to maintain high-level filters in their HVAC systems. They've now all gone back to basically the old filters that were there prior to COVID, even though COVID still is in the environment. So I think it's just important to note that when our school districts are going to be having these very difficult conversations about what's being cut, it's because this government hasn't prioritized education, public education, to the level that it should. And so what does the minister say to all of those school board trustees that are going to have to be facing the public, the parents in their schools, and say, we just don't have the resources because the province has not provided the resources to deal with not only a better and improved school system, but also the increased inflationary pressures that have hit us very, very hard in the last 18 months.
Minister.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and to the member opposite. Just want to let them know that it's the locally elected boards of education. They go through their local processes and they're related to budgets, as they are. We know that they are in the best position to understand the local needs and how to address the needs of their school communities. But I also want to talk about that there has been, we are providing a funding of 261.1 million that is being provided to the school minor capital projects for this year's budget, and that is 147.1 million from the annual facilities grant, which is an increase of 26.6 million compared to the last year. So the member was talking about that. And also out of that 261 million, 23 million is going into the carbon neutral capital funding to support energy and electrical upgrades at 86 schools, 65 million in school enhancement program funding to support projects across all the 60 school districts, 5 million into the playground equipment program. 13 million will also go towards the purchase of at least 67 new school buses, which is also very important, and also 8 million in building envelope program funding to support building remediation projects. But I also want to just reiterate again that the majority of the budget is going to the wages for the school budgets, and we are providing that in our funding.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the challenge that the school trustees have in front of them, and they had it last year, and they have it in front of them again this year. Of course, they do understand the needs of the community. What's frustrating, what I continue to hear about year over year, is that it's almost more challenging knowing what the needs are, because they don't have the funds to be able to achieve what the community's priorities are. So they're going back to the school, or they're going back to the school population, to their parents, to the kids, and to the staff, and saying, we don't have what we need. The funding, it's not a business. There's nothing to sell. There's nothing to market. The money comes from the provincial government, and if there's not enough to achieve even the basic needs that need to be achieved, if there's not enough to make up for the inflationary pressures that have hit schools, then they're in the position where they have the unfortunate knowledge of what's needed and also being forced to make a decision to cut. And that's the situation that these school districts are facing and that we're going to be hearing about. And it's important to raise this issue here and now, because British Columbians need to know that when those decisions about those local priorities are being made, it will be the magnifying glass will be on our school trustees. But they can only make decisions with the money that they have. And they've been saying consistently the unfunded inflationary pressures are going to put us in an unfortunate situation. And I think we need to understand where that responsibility lies. Yes, it lies at their feet to make the decision, but it doesn't lie at their feet to generate more money. They simply can't do that, other than maybe bring in more international students. But for schools that are full, that's not an option. One question to the minister around school boats, and this is a question that I've raised several times with the ministry over the past number of years, because I represent the Gulf Islands, and School District 64 has a very, very costly school boat program, and they hire water taxis to bring students and move them around in the morning, and to bring and move teachers and administrators around the Gulf Islands as well. This program has never been funded to the level that it's required. It is constantly taxing School District 64. I recognize that in the past, School District 64 might have had some financial challenges that needed to be resolved. Those have been resolved. Can we count on the ministry to step up and support the school boat program, to recognizing that it is a unique program? There's only a couple of districts in the province that have school boats. My riding happens to have one of them. Can School District 64 expect to see better support from the provincial government in this budget?
Minister.
Madam Chair, and thank you, Member, for that issue that you have raised with ST64. The ministry staff is aware of this issue, and we know it's a unique situation that they are facing, and the staff is in talks with them and looking for and having those conversations with the district. Yes.
Member.
Thank you, and appreciate the response. I don't want to leave it an impression that the provincial government doesn't already recognize that it's a unique situation. There is funding that recognizes that it's a unique situation. What I think I need to do on behalf of my constituents is recognize that is not funded enough, and it continues to add pressure on other school programming, and it also, I think, adds a significant amount of pressure on the families, the parents and the students, because they're getting on boats in the middle of wintertime. It's been a very successful program, but it's also something that causes stress. I'm going to finish here with education. Thank you for the opportunity to ask a few questions. I'll hand it over to my colleague from Prince George Valemont and return for childcare tomorrow. So thank you.